actually pose greater health risks than being fat. I know the first time I heard this, I was astounded, but this is the truth, and this is what we're going to talk today about. Why actually being skinny can be more dangerous than being overweight or over fat. So today we're going to be talking all about skinny fat and what actually skinny fat is. I know some of you have probably heard the term skinny fat, but don't actually quite know exactly what it is. So we're going to be defining what skinny fat is. I'm going to give you all the features of what skinny fat is, what to look out for, what the dangers are, what the risk factors are, and most importantly, how to reverse or prevent yourself or others from becoming skinny fat. So again, thank you so much for joining me this week for this week's episode of This Week in the Clinic. That's a lot of this weeks in that sentence. Where I take the lessons that I learn in the clinic over the week with working with real clients and bring them to you so that you can learn from them as well. For those of you who might be tuning in for the first time, I'm Josh Gitalis. I'm a clinical nutritionist and functional medicine practitioner, and I own and operate a clinic here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where I work with people one-on-one in person and all over the world as well. I also have a full functional nutrition certification program where I offer a variety of courses on a variety of topics, and you can check any information out on that at functionalnutrition.ca. So again, thank you all so much for joining me. I think this is going to be an eye-opening episode for a lot of you, and I know when I first learned about this topic, it was quite eye-opening for me. So for those of you who are joining me live right now, give me a thumbs up if you actually know what skinny fat is. Give me a thumbs up if you've heard the term skinny fat. Okay? Now, I know in our society, we are somewhat vain people, right? There's a lot of attention given to body composition. In the media, in magazines, on TV, pretty much everywhere you look involving, fashion or clothes or any advertisement, they're using body image, they're using body shape, body composition to help sell their product. Sometimes people are skinny, sometimes people are more on the fatter side, but it's very strategical in that way. And I think a lot of people have developed, if they look at these things unchecked, various ideas of what an ideal body type is. And I definitely think that there's a lean towards being skinny is healthier in our society. And that's actually definitely not the case, which we're going to talk about today. And it's interesting because our view of what healthy looks like and what healthy is and what the people are attracted to actually changes over time. If you go into the art gallery and you look at old paintings of the Renaissance times, you can see that women were portrayed with a lot more weight. They weren't as skinny as they're portrayed today in popular culture. So it actually changes over time. But today, again, we lean more towards skinny being healthy. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And that is what we're talking about today, all about skinny fat. So there's a whole bunch of different names that we give to this state in the body called skinny fat. There's some more just descriptive words like skinny fat, and there's more technical stuff, which we will get to. But one of the ones that appears quite often is TOFI. TOFI. What does TOFI stand for? Those are 4 letters that stand for thin on the outside, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside. And what this is called is visceral adipose tissue, where we actually have fat, or another name for fat is adipose tissue, on the inside of the body around the organs. And what you're going to learn today is that this can be a lot more dangerous than fat on the outside of the body. So let's first talk about who these people are. And give me a thumbs up or a heart if someone you know comes to mind when I mention these things. So this individual is skinny. They might be described as having a fast metabolism. They might be able to eat whatever they want, right? They eat carbs, they eat fats, they eat proteins, they eat anything they want. And what do? They just stay the same weight, okay? And people look at them and they say, how could that person eat whatever they want? They just stay the same weight. So I see there's a lot of thumbs up coming up. I think we all know one of these people. In fact, I know one quite well, and it's myself. I was one of those, or I have one of those body types. And there's a lot of people that have these types of body types where they can just eat whatever they want and nothing happens. And I was actually encouraged when I was younger to eat whatever I wanted. I could eat ice cream, I could eat fries, I could eat this, I could eat that, and it wouldn't really affect my body composition throughout my whole life. But I have to say that people like me and people who may have what's called a fast metabolism are actually at the highest risk for health complications. There are those people where you say, oh, that person, they've been skinny their whole life, they've looked healthy, and then they had a heart attack at 50, right? Or they're diagnosed with diabetes and we have absolutely no reason why, right? Like, it's like, that person looked healthy. How could they just have gotten diagnosed with diabetes? It actually makes no sense. But it makes complete sense, and that's what we're going to get into. So some features of people who are skinny fat. First of all, they have a normal body mass index. So what does body mass index mean? It means we look at the height of that individual and we look at the weight of that individual, and there's charts that you can use to figure that out, and you determine what their so-called body mass index is, which is one possible measure of whether someone's body composition is ideal or not. Now, there's multiple flaws with the body mass index measurement, which is part of our discussion today. So a person who's skinny fat is going to have a normal body mass index. You're going to look at them and you're going to say, oh, that person looks healthy. Okay? Now, this can be one of the most dangerous things because a lot of doctors or primary care practitioners look at these individuals and say, oh, yeah, you look like you have good body composition. Just continue what you're doing. But unfortunately, that is a very dangerous approach to dealing with this. So we want to understand that normal BMI isn't necessarily a good thing, right? Okay, in this situation. So they have a normal BMI, normal body mass index, but they have a higher percentage of body fat. And this can be measured by bioimpedance analysis machines where you hold electrodes and it figures out how much fat is in the body. It can be determined by a skilled caliper practitioner who does skin folds around the body to figure out body fat percentage. And this is going to give a lot more information as to how much fat that person actually has systemically on the inside of their body, okay? We also have a lack of muscle tone for these individuals. So they might be skinny, but you also look at them and they may not have a lot of muscle mass, a lot of muscle tone. These individuals sometimes do a lot of yoga, but don't necessarily do a lot of muscle work, right? A lot of weightlifting, right? I think we all know those people as well. And yoga has just exploded and it's amazing, but there's different aspects of yoga where you're working more of the muscle, and there's different types of yoga where you're doing more stretching. And really, for true health, we need to do stretching, we need to do muscle work, and we need to do some endurance work as well. So that would be one of the individuals. Now, I've got a couple models of characters here who are going to help us along here with the story. So we've got Mr. Buddha, okay? Mr. Buddha is our straight up fat individual. Look at that tummy, right? That is, not visceral fat, that's fat on the outside. And you can see it, you can feel it, it jiggles around a little bit, and that's our Buddha. So our Buddha just kind of sits there, doesn't do much, does a lot of meditation, super happy. And Mr. Buddha, the doctor tells him, you probably need to lose some weight because this isn't going in the right direction. Then we have Mr. Robot, okay? Here's Mr. Robot, and look how skinny Mr. Robot is. There we go. Mr. Robot is a very skinny individual. We look at him and we see on the outside, there's not a lot of fat, but we don't really know what's going on the inside. And eventually, if this guy stays this way, it's going to be a bad situation. So these are our models, Mr. Skinny Robot and Mr. Fat Buddha, okay? So let's just talk about some of the science and some of the key factors behind what skinny fat is. But before I get there, I want to show you a picture, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. So here you can see, I hope you can see, on this side, and what we're looking at here is we're looking at a sort of a view into the body of these different individuals. So here we've got a body that doesn't have a lot of that fat. Now, of course, a little bit of fat is good. It protects our organs, it gives us stored energy, it gives us heat insulation and cool insulation. Fat is really, really important. We want a certain amount of body fat. So that's the lowest. We see some body fat there. Moderate risk is actually sort of what we would call the stereotypical overweight person, where you can see the fat, right? You've got the jiggly stomach, or the fat on the outside that we can see. And then finally, highest risk is where we have a lot of fat on the inside. I hope you can see that. And that is called visceral adipose tissue, sometimes called over that. Okay? So we've got fat, we've got that. So we've got different names for this type of condition. And that's when we have all this fat on the inside. Now, what some of my clients don't realize, who might be over that, is that fat works like an organ. So I've got a liver, I've got a heart, I've got a brain, I've got kidneys. All these different organs don't really change in size, right? They don't really change their metabolic activity. Of course they do based on what the body has to do, but they're not going to alter too much. Our fat, however, is metabolically active, and the more of it you have, the more metabolically active it is. The less of it you have, the less metabolically active it is. And it creates all sorts of chemicals depending on the state of your body. So when we have an individual who is over that, another name for it that we've used today is skinny fat, and even another name we used for it today is TOFI, which is thin on the outside, fat on the inside. They have all sorts of chemicals, and some of these can actually be measured in the bloodstream. So one of the features of these individuals is high insulin. So I was talking about earlier how these individuals who are skinny and can kind of eat whatever they want, we all know someone like this, aren't necessarily doing a healthy thing. We think that they're getting away with it. I have people come to me all the time. I'm working with a client and I'm like, you got to straighten some things up. We got to change up the diet, get some exercise. And they're like, but, my husband or my wife, or I have a friend who, and they just eat whatever they want and they stay the same weight. What's up with that? And what I say to them is, they're not getting away with it, right? They may appear like they're getting away with it on the outside. They may not be getting our classical fat or obese, but on the inside there can be profound physiological changes happening that are extremely high risk, and they will if we're living that type of lifestyle. So high insulin is one of the factors that we see. When someone's on that blood sugar roller coaster, eating lots of candy and carbs and whatnot, we're going to get a spike in insulin. Insulin can increase a chemical in the body known as NF-kappa beta, nuclear factor kappa beta, which is an inflammatory compound which creates this what's called silent inflammation in the body. You don't necessarily feel it, you're not hurting, you're not in pain, but it's constantly keeping this inflammatory fire going within the systemic system, and that puts those individuals at higher risk for things like cardiovascular disease. Okay? So these individuals sometimes drop dead or have a heart attack at 50, 60. The first sign of heart disease for some people is a heart attack. Okay? So that's something we want to avoid. They have low sex hormone binding globulins. They can have high testosterone and high estrogens. Oftentimes these people can have polycystic ovarian syndrome for women, where again they can have a good body mass index, but they can be expressing these hormonal changes that are suboptimal, and that can result in pathologies like polycystic ovarian syndrome. They might have menstrual irregularities, right? PMS symptoms. Oftentimes, PMS is brushed off as something that's normal for women, but it's actually not so normal. When your hormones are in balance and your menstrual cycle is working properly, PMS should be to a minimum or not even existent. Now, one of the things I mentioned was high estrogen dominance. And if this persists over a long time, over many, many years, that can be expressed as endometrial cancers. That can be expressed as breast cancer. And that's what the research shows us, that these individuals who are over VAT, who might be producing higher estrogen levels than they should be over extended period of times, are much higher risk for hormone-related cancers. So this is something that we definitely need to pay attention to. Now, more on cardiovascular disease. Heart disease is like the number 1 or the number 2 killer. I think it's always neck and neck with cancer. But heart disease is a huge killer across developed countries. And as I mentioned before, one of the first signs of heart disease is a heart attack. So sometimes they don't see it coming. And again, in these individuals that are over VAT, that are skinny, have a skinnier type of body composition, it can just sneak up on them. So we see things like high triglycerides in the bloodstream. We see higher levels of the bad cholesterol, lower levels of the good cholesterol, and what we call the bad cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. There's actually subtypes, which, some are actually good, some are actually bad. So there's large LDL particles and there's small LDL particles. And the small LDL particles are the ones that are most dangerous. And these tests are not looked at by a standard medical doctor or practice. You have to go to a functional medicine practitioner who knows about these subtypes of the cholesterols to actually get the full panel. And again, that could be life-saving, because when you look at LDL on a typical lipid panel, it's not looking at the subfractions, it's just taking all together, and you don't actually know if it's the bad ones or the good ones. So Mr. Skinny Robot over here can have high LDL of the bad particles, can have high triglycerides, can have high insulin. Mr. Robot's a boy, but if I had Mrs. Robot, they might have high estrogen. For men, they usually have low testosterone, and that can result in some nasty symptoms and nasty pathologies. We can also see high blood sugar related to high insulin, and we can also see high blood pressure at later stages as well. So what we see here is that this state of being over VAT, which I showed you earlier, which is a lot of this visceral adipose tissue, can actually be a much higher risk than anticipated. Okay, so I'm just going to check in here to see what types of comments we have come to see here. So Megan Telpner, my beautiful wife, tuned in, of course, to give us a nice comment saying that she's a Renaissance goddess, speaking about the body type of the women back in the Renaissance times, where they had a little bit more of the fat on the outside of the body. Okay, And back then, of course, they associated it more with being healthy and as something as desirable. Maya says that I have one of those types as well. Laugh out loud. My friends used to hate me in high school. Thankfully, I eat well. Yeah, and again, these people with the body types where they can just eat whatever they want and they don't gain weight, it's both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because they get to really enjoy the vanity part of it, of being what we call skinny. But it puts them at a very, very high risk because they get ingrained into their head that they don't have to exercise and that they don't have to eat well because they can just maintain their body weight like that anyway. Okay? So again, these people need to be very cognizant. So Maya, I'm on the same page as you. Luckily, I've taken the healthy path in life, and that's not going to be an issue for me either. And Welsh mentions that she's a Buddha, right? So our little Buddha here, which has more fat on the outside, those people get the message a lot quicker and might be making changes a lot quicker as well, okay? Esther, thank you for mentioning the topic. And Karen's saying, so the test our GP does isn't enough. Great question, Karen. Thank you for bringing that up. So as I mentioned, a doctor, to look at a cardiometabolic risk factors, are really going to do just a basic lipid panel. And in a basic lipid panel, we get our LDL tested, we get our HDL tested, we get triglycerides tested, we get total cholesterol tested. They might look at blood sugar levels. But, as I mentioned, there's actually subtypes of LDL. There's subtypes of HDL, which that type of instrumentation and that type of test does not pick up on. There's good LDL and there's bad LDL. The good LDL is actually larger particles, and the small LDL is the more dangerous stuff. So you need to get specialized testing from a functional medicine practitioner in order to know these subtypes. And the test actually, I don't think it costs too much either. It's pretty reasonable, usually under about $200. So that's something that if someone thinks that they might be skinny fat or over fat, they should get that looked at to actually see their risk factors and to start to make changes in order to bring those levels back into balance. Okay, so now we're going to finish up here by talking about how to reverse what we called TOFI, right? Thin on the outside, fat on the inside, or what we've also been calling skinny fat or over fat. How do we reverse it? How do we prevent it as well? For those of you who might be a bit younger and have that fast metabolism body type, how do we make sure that we don't get there? Well, obviously the foundation of everything here, I'm a nutritionist, so I gotta say it, whole foods, lots of plants, high fat diets, and high protein diets. So it really isn't a good situation that we call the same fat that we eat in food that we also call fat on the body. We have the same word for it. We should have different words for those things because they're so different. And then people start to associate, oh, consuming more fat is going to make me fat. It couldn't be further from the truth. Okay? So we want to have high fat, helps to balance the blood sugar, helps to regulate insulin, helps to give us energy, helps to lubricate the joints, helps to fuel the nervous system, does a lot of fantastic things. So we want whole foods, high fat, high protein diet. That's number one. We're going to talk about 6 things here to reverse or prevent skinny fat. The second is strength training. And this is one of the areas I think that women greatly lack. So again, because of vanity in society, we think men should have big muscles, right? So men are always going to the gym to work out their muscles and get big muscles. You know, if you go to any gym and you go to the weight section, almost always there's more men than women. I think that's just a fact. I've been members of many gyms, and that's what I always see. Women are more prone to do like more yoga, more stretching, you know, aerobic classes and things like that. But they definitely should be doing weight training as well, because the more muscle mass we have, the less fat we're going to have. Muscle is a very metabolically active organ. And the cool thing about it is when you grow and build new muscle, it doesn't just do its thing when you're growing and building it, like when you're lifting the weight, but it works for you afterwards as well. So more muscle mass equals less visceral fat, and that's going to be very important for decreasing those risk factors. So we have to do some weightlifting. Okay, women, you got to get out there and lift some weights. Doing some nice stretching in yoga probably isn't enough. We need to see some hypertrophy of those muscles, some growing of those muscles, okay? So number 1, whole foods, good diet, high fat, high protein. Number 2, weight training. Number 3, we need to have some level of stress processing in our life. We have emotional stress, physical stress, electromagnetic stress, stress from work, stress from relationships, stress from our kids, stress from our spouses, stress from driving to and from work every day. We need to have ways to process that through the body. A lot of those stresses can create high cortisol, and that can add insult to injury in our metabolic profile of our skinny fat person here. Okay, so we need to keep cortisol levels down, and we need to have ways to process stress. It's not so much as stress management, because we can't really manage all the stressors in our life. We can to some extent, but we have to find ways to move them through the body. Stress processing. The fourth one, which I'm going to introduce it, I want to see if anyone can guess it. So this has probably the strongest effect on our hormones out of anything in this world. Okay, and please put your guesses in as soon as you think what you know what I'm talking about. It's not something everyone gets enough of. Some people, most people don't get enough of it. We pride ourselves in, I think, our society of not getting enough of it. There's nothing, there's no food, there's no supplement, there's nothing that can mimic what it does. There's no drug that can mimic what it does. And I see Ann Welsh put it up there first, I think. And then Karen came along, and Beth on a quick second and third. And Kim, sleep. There's nothing else that is as effective as balancing our hormones and helping us as sleep. We need to sleep. So you have to sleep has to be one of the most sacred things for you. You have to make every effort you can to get a good sleeping environment, to get into the mode of sleep, and to have a good, nice, deep sleep, because that's really going to affect your hormones in a profound way. Okay, number 5 is hydration. We need lots of good water, good clean water. We are mostly water. Drink lots of water, super important, fundamental. And then finally, some supplements can be really helpful. A multivitamin, vitamin D, some fish oils possibly, or a balanced fatty acid oil, and maybe some probiotics are just, a good base for a little supplement regimen. And make sure you're not getting Costco or Walmart supplements. Go to your health food store, ask someone there what the best quality supplements are. You pay for what you get. They're not all created equal. If you want to learn more about that, you can check out my Centrum article that I wrote a blog on as why Centrum is possibly one of the worst things you can take for your body. And those are the 6 things. So if you want to reverse or prevent over-fatness, skinny fat, TOFI, you want to eat a whole foods plant-based diet, you want to do strength training, stress processing, get good sleep, drink lots of water, and maybe take some supplements. So we covered a lot today. Do we have any questions from those of you who are tuning in live? Just going to check in here to see if we do. Shelley mentions that weight training has made a huge difference for me, and I did the CNE program with Megan and learned so much. Great topic. Oh, thank you for bringing that up, Shelley. And again, I think it's so important, especially for women, to do some weight training. I have a friend, and one of my friends and her mother actually took up weight training in her 60s and is competing in weightlifting competitions for seniors in her 60s. It's unbelievable. She's like deadlifting, I think, more than her own weight. So it doesn't matter what age you start. You just got to start. In my old clinic office, I used to have on my wall, the best way to get started is to get started, and it couldn't be it could be more true. I also remember back, believe it or not, but I actually remember some stuff from when I was in university. And I studied kinesiology in university and sports science, and I remember looking at studies and articles in my textbooks and journals on the response the body has when seniors, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, take up weight training and take up exercise. The changes are profound even that late in life. So it really doesn't matter what point in life you are. You just want to get on this. Because remember our traditional Buddha, who is the stereotypical fat, right, is actually probably at less risk than those people who are like Mr. Robot here, who are the skinny fat, have that visceral adipose tissue, and may not know it. It's not going to be a good situation for them. We want to be nice and strong. We want to be good on the inside and on the outside. Okay, just going to check in here. It is a great reminder. Karen's saying it's a great reminder. I always avoided weight training, and yes, there should be no reason to avoid it. And Tanya says, as women get older and they hold on weight, is there anything different you would add to your list? No, I think that's definitely a good place to start. Of course, when I work with people in my clinic, we're doing fine-tuning and we're really trying to figure out what might be going on if they're holding on to weight and can't lose it. I think weight training is a big takeaway for today for women to get rid of that visceral adipose tissue. Another thing to investigate is thyroid health. I think actually the first episode of This Week in the Clinic was all about thyroid health. So if you want to get a little bit of primer on what tests to ask for and how to assess if your thyroid is in order, go back to episode number 1 of This Week in the Clinic. It's a good one. And check out what I had to say there all about thyroid. That's going to give you a really good idea of what's going on there. And those are probably a couple of the key things that I see with women who have trouble losing weight. Another factor, which I'm not going to get into too much today, is that people are overstressed, right? They're overstressed, and then they go to the gym and they try to pound it in a cardio type activity, and they're just putting more stress on their body, and they find that even though they're working out super hard, they're not losing any weight. And that's, again, probably a function of high cortisol, high stress, poor stress processing, and that person has to kind of reevaluate a lot of their life to figure out where they're burning that candle. And thank you, Jill, for asking the question. Jill says we can watch old episodes. Yes, you can. Every single This Week in the Clinic here on Facebook Live is immediately recorded and available on my page. If you go to Josh Gitalis Clinical Nutritionist, there's a little tab that says Videos in Facebook, and you can see all the replays there. Pretty cool. And Karen says, does adrenal fatigue play a part? Absolutely, 100% adrenal fatigue plays a part. It's a sign that our body has lost resilience, and we have to rebuild that back up. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for joining me. If you didn't catch the beginning, go back, catch it. We had some really important key factors there that opened up the topic. Also, I'll be answering questions here for about 48 hours. So if you are watching the replay, please put your questions, comments below. I always appreciate a thumbs up. Keeps me motivated to do more of these. Alexi, thank you for joining me. Always nice having you, one of my old-time students from the Homeopathic College. So nice to see you joined us. And we'll be doing this again next week for This Week in the Clinic. If you aren't on my newsletter, please go do that at joshgitalis.com, where I announce the time of the episode, the topic of the episode. You get replay details. You get a lot more information that's provided here. And you also get all of my recent news and a lot of other functional nutrition and functional medicine information. And again, you can do that over at joshgitalis.com. So today we talked about skinny fat, what it is, why Mr. Robot is at very high risk for getting skinny fat and why we don't want him to fall. We want him to be nice and strong. What the metabolic factors are with skinny fat, what to look out for in the labs, what the typical skinny fat person profile is like, and most importantly, how to prevent and how to reverse skinny fat. Again, thank you all so much for joining me. Remember, the best way to get started is to get started, and I hope to see you all again very soon. Take care and have a wonderful day.